Hi folks, this is Chris Knowles from SideQuest Ninja. Lots of new features have made into Hexahedra since the last devlog video, and since then I've also run some playtests and I've implemented lots of feedback from those, and so in this video I'm going to show you the highlights of what's changed. And although it's not the biggest change, perhaps the most obvious change is that the factory backgrounds have all been updated. So we've got rid of the old plain grey ones from previous videos, and I found a great 2D artist, Marta Ivanovska, and she made me a whole variety of different factory backgrounds that I can arrange at random to kind of give a bit of variety to the background of the factory. And there are 3 versions of each type, so I can show workstations that are dim, where they're inactive, that then light up when they become active, and also turn red when there's some kind of error. I've also added a new set of commands to the game, the sync commands, and these will get a workstation to pause until an adjacent workstation executes a sync command in the appropriate direction. So for example, when a workstation hits a sync right command, it will pause execution until the workstation on the right hits a sync left command. Now, as with any powerful tool, you can kind of tie yourself up in knots with these commands if you're not careful, but really thinking through the synchronization logic can allow you to produce some very compact solutions, so it's worth persevering with. One thing I needed to get done before running any playtests was I needed to implement a tutorial system. I was very keen to see how playtesters got on learning about the game just through the tutorial rather than having me explain things, because obviously once the full game is released, that's how everyone will play it. And I got some great feedback both on the game itself and on the tutorial system from the playtesters, so I want to give a big thank you to everyone who took part. Now, tutorial systems are surprisingly complicated things, not because you need to, create the text for them and create some new UIs, but because the tutorial system needs to be able to work out whether or not the player is actually doing what they've been asked to. Now, if you go around putting lots of special case code into your game, to deal with bits and pieces of the tutorial here and there, that gets very messy very quickly. You end up with a very brittle code that's hard to update, and it's not really sustainable. And so what I've done instead is I built a system that sits on top of the game that is capable of watching what the player is doing, and the tutorial is powered by that. Now that has made the tutorial system one of the most complex parts of the game, and you can get a feel for that just from looking at the sheer number of classes I've had to create in order to get it to work. The tutorials end up as large JSON files, and to help me assemble them I also created a Unity editor to work with the tutorial, so I could assemble them using drop-downs and checkboxes rather than having to edit the files by hand. So let me show you some of the innards of the tutorial system so you can see how it works. So the trigger classes are what defines when a tutorial pop-up should open, or also when it should be considered complete and it can close. And these deal with things the player needs to do, so a player needs to perhaps click on something or put a particular device into a particular workstation in the level. One particularly common one says that one tutorial pop-up should open when the previous one closes, and I can use this to chain multiple pop-ups together. And these trigger classes are also what we use when we want to save to and load from the tutorial JSON files. We also have the watchers, and these are what actually powers the tutorial when it's running. These are the things that actually check whether or not the player is clicking something they've been asked to, or they've put a device in a particular workstation and so on, and there is indeed one that checks when one pop-up has been closed so another one can open. One thing that does make the tutorial UI complicated is that I want to anchor these pop-ups to various bits of the game, whether that might be a device in a workstation or some part of the UI, such as the source window view. And in order to do that, this is one area where I've had to change the game code itself in order to accommodate the tutorial system. There are an awful lot of objects in the game have a mono behavior attached to them called tutorial UI anchor, and that allows me to tag a particular UI element as being something that the tutorial pop-up can attach itself to. So for example, the play button here has one that tags it as the play button to the tutorial system. There were various other challenges, such as getting the tutorial window to position itself sensibly on the screen and to move around as the player pans the view, but it's all working pretty well now, and I got lots of feedback on the text and the flow of the tutorial as well from the playtesting, and I've already made some improvements there. Pretty much everything else I've done has been to improve the way you interact with the game, and perhaps the biggest one is being able to drag to select multiple commands at once and then drag them around as a group. You can also use keyboard commands to drag copies rather than originals, or to flip the commands if you want to drag them onto a command track that is running in the opposite direction. I've also improved command highlighting, so we were already highlighting inaccessible commands that would never be executed because of the way the path of execution would take through the tracks, but we also now highlight commands that are invalid for some reason. So if, for example, you have a command that is trying to send a cube over to the workstation to the right, but that workstation either doesn't exist or it's inactive, then the command will be highlighted in red, and the tooltip will also tell you exactly what the problem is. One issue that kept coming up in playtesting is that it's hard to visualize the bits of a cube that you can't see. and so I've added 3 new features to make it easy to keep track of what is going on. The first is that during a run you can now click on a cube to bring up a nice rotatable visualization of the cube that sits alongside it and that updates in real time as the actual cube itself changes, and you can use that to spin it around and see what different parts of the cube are doing and how they've changed. The second is that it's now possible to ask the factory to execute just one next step, with the factory automatically pausing when that step is finished, and that allows you to take a measured pace through the factory and see if it is doing what you think it is. And finally, the biggest of the 3 is that I've added the ability to rewind the factory and play previous steps. So as the factory runs, the timeline shows what step the factory is on, and you can drag a handle to move the factory backwards in time and then replay from there. This will be a big help in debugging your solutions and making sure the factory is doing what you think it's doing without having to restart from the beginning every time. There is also a replay button which appears when a solution fails, and that replays the last step so you can see what went wrong there. But even when a puzzle has failed, you can still drag the handle backwards and replay from any previous point if you want to. Now, very few games in this genre seem to provide a rewind function, so I was very pleased to be able to get it working. And in fact, it turns out that because of the way I'd structured Hexahedra's code, it was a little bit easier than it might have been. So the underlying simulation, which is just a DLL that's provided to the Unity client, that every step of the factory produces a list of events about what should happen, and the Unity client uses those to display what's going on to the user. Now in the past, after every step, I was simply throwing away all those events, but now we keep them around so we can rewind back to a point in the past and play forward from there. Now when we do a rewind, we'll also have to restore the factory state to its previous position in order that when we replay the events we're doing it to the right thing. And so when we at the end of every step, a workstation also needs to keep a record of the state of the cubes it controls, and some of the devices too that have some state that changes between steps. So for example, the panel adder remover, which can store panels to then put them back onto a cube later, that now needs to keep a record of its state over time, so that when we rewind we can get the factory back into the correct state for that step and then start playing the events forward again. Now, as it stands, when you do a rewind, you can only rewind to the boundaries of steps, to the start and end of a particular step. I am hoping that I will then be able to improve this, so you'll be able to sort of smoothly move time through a step and see a factory sort of move forwards and backwards as you go. Even in this current state, though, this is a really big help in debugging your factory and seeing what it's up to. Now, despite my best efforts, I'm sure that when the Hexahedra demo is released, you guys will find various bugs that I'll need to fix, and so to help with that, I've also added an in-game bug reporter to the client. And from there, you can give me a brief description of the bug and tell me how to reproduce it. And when you submit a bug, I'll also receive a copy of a screenshot of the game, the Unity log file, a dump of the scene, and some anonymous hardware specs. And those will be really useful for me in tracking down what it is that's going wrong. I also want to give credit where it's due when people help to make Hexahedra better by reporting a bug, and so I've created a system where you can claim a bug and participate in a leaderboard on Discord. So there's a bot that powers this and it runs on the SideQuest Ninja Discord server. When you report a bug in the game, you will get a 4-digit code, and you can then go to the Discord server and claim that code with the bot, and you'll then be able to see, track its progress and so on, and there'll be a leaderboard showing who's reported the most bugs. The leaderboard will also appear in the credits, although I will check with everyone first, and if you want to remain anonymous, that's completely fine. So that's the progress since the last video. Right now I'm working on some final features that need to get implemented before I can release the demo, things like being able to change the resolution from the options menu, that kind of thing. The Hexahedra is already available to be wishlisted on Steam, and that's where the demo will come out when it's ready, so do go and wishlist it there. In the meantime, as ever, I'm still live streaming all of the development on Twitch, so do tune in there if you want to see the final pieces for the demo come together, and if you want to keep up the devlogs, do subscribe here. But thank you for joining me, and I hope you'll be enjoying the Hexahedra demo very soon.